Well, there may not be a need for language because our communication may be direct and unmediated,
Right. Now, I'm not saying there's no communication. I'm saying that there's no need to have a specific language for communication.
including symbolic language.
Speaking symbolic language, yeah.
Yeah.
It speaks to a very different kind of consciousness that you have like, in the death state
Mm-hmm.
as in the waking state. But still, there's some properties in common, like extreme fluidity, uh, tremendous capacity, and sense of release, sense of
Mm-hmm.
lightness, freedom.
Right.
Perhaps in some cases a little too much of all of those, and
It
you
could
need
be.
to ground yourself.
Well, it could be overwhelming, and the mind may protect itself with images. Right. So just the way that we protect ourselves during our conscious waking life with images, beliefs, psychic structures, that those may also be present during the death experience. And it sounds like this is partly one of the functions of the bardos, is to clarify those mental images until they're seen through and the soul is ready for the next stage of its journey. So it could be, post-life processing, or just could be residue from the lack of clarity of the mind, throwing up images as a defense against the overwhelming openness and emptiness of death.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm sure that in comparison to the way that we acquired most of what stabilizes us now as individuals, our language, our personal histories, cultural knowledge, our cultural roles, those disappear at death. Those disappear much more quickly than they were acquired. What took us a lifetime of development actually probably is all wiped out within an instant in the death realm. So there's got to be a huge shock,
Yeah.
potentially a huge shock, once you're experiencing death itself, and the loss of those capacities, and
Yeah, I would think so. And not just a defense against negative experiences, but also positive ones. We're not in touch with the potential of, love, consciousness, or bliss in our waking life, probably to the extent that we are during the death experience.
right. I'm having some weird feelings right now, actually.
That what?
I said I'm experiencing weird sensations right now.
As you talk about this,
Yeah,
what do you
it's
notice?
making me yawn, and feel like I'm losing contact with ordinary consensus reality and my ordinary usual waking state of
Uh,
consciousness.
so it feels more fluid, less constrained.
It feels like it's an altogether different realm of consciousness. Like my ordinary waking state in ordinary life is something that I grasp onto very tightly, and which I don't allow much in the way of variation before I start to panic
Mm-hmm.
speak out about it. So, I guess the question is, how much can we morph in the Bardo state, as you're suggesting? How much can we allow ourselves to experience what we haven't experienced for virtually for a lifetime?
Yeah.
How much can we allow ourselves to experience of that, and make sense of that, instead of being overwhelmed by fear
Right.
or aversion?
Right. Yeah, and I think you're right. To the extent that we resist life, we resist death as well. So if we live our life based on fear, then chances are that our death may be filled with fear as well, and including the post-death state.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah.
think that's why it's so important, the mental state you go into. They say that the mental state you have when you enter into the death realm has a disproportionate impact on what happens to you thereafter. And that makes perfect sense to me. That if we are, if our experience is characterizing death as being a certain way, or resisting death, our experience of death, and we immediately go into, we start where we are in the experience, and whatever experience we're having at the moment may have a disproportionate impact on our experience after death.
Yeah, especially if we're so exquisitely sensitive, as we're hypothesizing, in the post-death state. Right? If there's no barriers, no resistances, we'll be exquisitely sensitive to even the slightest impact of, both fear or awareness.
There's that, and then there's also the fact that whatever we've kept down, whatever we've held down beneath the surface of consciousness, as part of our the unacceptable parts of our personality, that all has got to rise to the surface, right? Because mechanisms of repression are going to be mechanisms of repression include primarily the body. Somatizing, at the most fundamental level, we somatize our trauma.
Right.
When the body disappears, that has all got to come to the surface.
Oh, sure.
But death, as we talk about it, to me, it seems like death actually has the potential to be very chaotic, very painful, very frightening, very overwhelming. It clashes a good deal with near-death experience, as it's commonly understood and talked about in our culture. But it does make sense to me that the Tibetan versions, for instance, are more in line with what actually happens when you die, which is chaos, essentially, for most people.
Yeah.
Their minds are like chaos.
Well, but I also wonder, is that really true? I mean, that could be a projection that we have based on our current state of mind, that it's going to be chaotic. And if the near-death literature shows that there's an experience that's contrary to that case, I think that's interesting. Right? In other words, the overwhelming natural state, which I optimistically think is closer to love, consciousness, or bliss, may in some cases swamp these negative states, these chaotic states, which I think tends to happen when spiritual experience takes over ego experience. Ego experience just disappears, almost like a tiny light compared to the vastness of what's actually manifesting as reality.
Well, it might. Definitely might. I mean,
yeah.
In some sense, capacity to experience those things is a developed capacity.
Yeah.
Based on a lot of work on oneself during lifetime. And I guess I could go either way. I could see either. All of which goes back to something we talked about before, which is that the experience of death cannot be a unitary experience for everyone. It has to be as many flavors as there are people on the planet, for that matter. There's every experience of death, like every experience of life, is unique.
Right.
There are commonalities.
Right. Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. That just as living is unique to every individual, death and the death experience must also be unique.
Yeah. You think.
Yeah. Which is actually, in some way, part of the beauty of death, right? That each person's death is unique, precious, and individual. And so there's something here, I think, to be honored about death and the dying process. It's almost like it's a unique capstone for every individual's life.
Right. It also makes sense to me that, as one of the great Tibetan yogis said, and I don't know who it was, I don't remember who it was at this point, but he said that death, even now, even after he had experiences with death, presumably multiple experiences with death, that still frightened him because the power of the universe is so much greater than our individual power that we're, in some sense, we're at the mercy of nature